Alright, we're live, guys. We're live. How's it going? Welcome to this live class of Aussie English. Brought to you by the Aussie English podcast. Obviously, guys, if you haven't listened to that yet, go over to theaussieenglishpodcast.com and make sure that you download those episodes. They're all free. You can get them on your phone. You can use the website. There's all this free content on the aussieenglishpodcast.com for you to use to upgrade your Aussie English. The link's in the description. There's also all my free content that you can download. Hey, Reno. There's all the free content via that link. So if you're watching, click the link and you can get my ED ending cheat sheet. There's an instruction for how to use contractions like a native speaker. You can download that. All that's free, guys. Use the links in the description. And obviously also there is the Aussie English Classroom if you wish to upgrade your English with classes that go with the expression episodes and the interview episodes on the podcast. So before we start, I have a special announcement. I want us to thank everyone via the Patreon page, the Aussie English Patreon page, who donate generously their money a little bit every month to help me at Aussie English. This month, I've been able to purchase these two books. Hopefully I can do it without shining the light on you. This one is How to Teach Connected Speech. So that's going to help me a lot. It's pretty big. That's going to help me teach you guys connected speech in English. And then I have this one, which is How to Have Perfect Pronunciation in English. So I'm going to be using these books to help me develop my methods, my understanding of how to teach connected speech, to teach pronunciation, and give back to you guys. So once again, thank you so much to everyone who is a patron via my Patreon page and who has donated money to help me improve my skills so that I can help you guys. So if you want to sign up, check out Aussie English Patreon. That's Patreon. Just do a Google search and you'll find it. Anyway, we can get into today's episode. I'll just say hello to a few of you. Lima, how are you going? Rocio, how are you going? And Desian Barbosa, how are you? Alejandra, Reno as well. How are you guys? I hope you're all going well. Thanks so much for showing up. You guys seem to always be here first. So first in, best dressed, I guess. You guys get the front seats in this virtual classroom. And I guess, what would you say? The early bird gets the worm. There's another expression for you. So it's kind of like if you get up early in the morning, you'll succeed as a result of that effort. So the early bird, the bird that wakes up first, gets the worm. Hey Yifan and hey Rahil, I hope I said that right. So today, guys, we're going to be just going through some questions that I've already been asked ahead of time. So I already have those here. But if you guys have questions that you would like to ask me to answer at the end of this series of questions, put them in the comments below. So if you have any questions relating to English, you want me to define and use a word, talk about grammar, pronunciation, Australia, whatever it is, put that question down in the comments section there and I will get to it as soon as I can. Apart from that, guys, I should remember, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. I assume that you can hear me all right because no one said anything yet, like Pete, your mic sucks and it's broken. So give me a thumbs up or a love heart if you guys can hear me okay. And if you wouldn't mind, please give this video a share, as it'll boost it in the Facebook feed. Facebook tends to be pretty harsh these days with regards to who actually sees the content on Facebook. So that's been a bit of a battle recently, getting enough, I'll publish something on my Facebook page and no one will see it unless I like it, I share it, I comment on it, and then all of a sudden everyone sees it. And so, yeah, it is weird how Facebook's gotten pretty strict with, I think you must just have to see the content really, really quickly as soon as it comes up, or it just plummets and goes to the bottom of the feed. So if you can, please give it a share, tag some friends in it who you think will improve their English with this resource as well. Hey Henry, how are you going? Just let me share this once in the Aussie English group and then we can get started. So I think that's about it, guys. Let's make sure everything's muted so we don't get some random sounds in the middle of the class. All right, let's just get into it. Boom. So the first question comes from Josh, who's from Korea. Josh, I know that you're going to be listening to this later because you were telling me you couldn't make it to the class, hence asking the question. So Josh wanted to know, he's bought the Effortless Phrasal Verb course that I have out there, guys. That should be linked in the description as well if you're finding phrasal verbs difficult. But he wants to know about words like against, along, beyond, throughout, and behind. He specifically asked, how do I use these words? So I thought I would define each of them, go through them with an example sentence just so that you guys have a bit of understanding of what these words are. So the first one he asked about was against, okay? Against. So against is to sort of be in or into something physically, in physical contact with something. So if this was like a wall and you imagine that this was a person, or it could be anything, if I put this against the wall, it's like that. It's against this thing. And it could lean against it. You know, you might have a rake, or you might put your hand up against a wall and you're doing this. It's that this wall is supporting you, or you're in physical contact with it. You're against the wall. Okay, so that's against. Along. Along is the next one. So moving in a constant direction on something, more or less in a horizontal sort of direction. So it'll be like this, you know, you imagine you've got like a coastline. Imagine Australia, there's the east coastline that goes like this, you know, Melbourne down here, Sydney here, Brisbane, Townsville, Cairns, up the coast, up the east coast. If you were to drive from Melbourne to Sydney, you might drive along the coast. And that's the idea that this is the coast, and you're sort of following it the whole way, you're going along the coast. So along is usually you're next to the thing and you're changing, you're displacing, so you're moving, okay? So that is along. So we drove along the coast from Melbourne to Sydney. Beyond, okay, so beyond something, that is at or further from the side of something. So you imagine you've got a fence here. You're not allowed to go past this fence. You're not allowed to go beyond this fence. So beyond it is past this region, okay? So imagine you're a farmer, you've got a paddock, there are fences made of books maybe, and beyond the fence, so on this side of the fence away from you, beyond it is forest. Or maybe beyond it is someone else's farm. But it just means to be at or to the further side of something, okay? To be beyond something. Throughout. Throughout. See if you can say that with me, guys. This chair is squeaking like something crazy. Throughout. Throughout. That's a difficult word. So that's spelled T-H-R-O-U-G-H-O-U-T, throughout. And it means that if something is throughout something else, it is that it is in every location within that thing. So, for instance, our cats in this house, we have cats here, and they leave hair throughout the house, everywhere, all throughout the house. There is fur everywhere, okay? There is fur all throughout the house from the cats. So in every part of a place or an object, throughout. The last one he asked about was behind. So behind is just to be on the far side of something, kind of like beyond, but behind is like this. I'm currently behind the book, okay? So this book is now behind this book, behind. It's just on the farther side of something. So I hope that helps, Josh. Just make sure you go over this, have a listen a few times, try using these, write down some sentences, and you'll get the sense of them eventually. But yeah, just keep using them, mate. Just keep using them. All right, so the next question comes from Ella. Ella says, what does she say here? I've got some issues with some and any, the word some and the word any. Okay, so when should I consider a noun as countable or uncountable so that I can decide if I should use the plural or the singular after some? Okay, with uncountable or countable nouns, you just need to learn those, you know, like people, children, they're plural, and person, child is singular. But let's go through what, say, some means, any means, and also no. You didn't mention no, okay? So some, the word some, S-O-M-E, we use that as a way of sort of talking about, I guess it's an article. We use it to talk about another noun or plural. plural usually, and we use it in affirmative sentences, so sentences that aren't negated. So for instance, I have some food. He has found some books to read. Some books, again, plural. And she could see some animals. She could see some animals. Okay? So we use some there because all of those sentences are affirmative. They're not negated. They're not negated. They're positive sentences. We use any when those sentences are negated. So instead of saying I haven't some food, we have to say I haven't any food, or I haven't got any food. Instead of saying he hasn't found any some books, he hasn't found some books to read, you would say he hasn't found any books to read. Okay, so you would say I don't have any food. He hasn't found any books to read. She couldn't see any animals. So we have to use any, A-N-Y, we have to use the word any with not. Not has to be in there, negating a verb. The sentence has to be negative, and then we use any. I have some, I don't have any. No, okay. No is the same as not any, except we use no in affirmative sentences. So sentences like some that are positive, except no in this case is the opposite of some. I have some books, I have no books. So both of those sentences are affirmative. One means that you have some books, plural, I have some, and the other one means that you have no books, none, absolutely none, okay? So we'll use it instead of not any. In these sentences, I have no food, I haven't got any food, I have some food. He has found no books to read, he hasn't found any books to read, he has found some books to read. She could see no animals. She couldn't see any animals, and she could see some animals, okay? So I hope that helps. The same rules here can be defined for indefinite pronouns, guys, like somewhere, anywhere, nowhere. It's all the same rule. Something, anything, anywhere. So for instance, you could say, I don't have anything to eat. I don't, negated, have anything to eat. You could say, he has found someone to read with. He has found, affirmative, someone to read with. And then you could say, she could go nowhere. She couldn't go anywhere. She could go somewhere. She could go nowhere. So not, any, and no, they both mean the same thing. One of them negates one verb and then uses any, and the other one is an affirmative sentence. And then you've got some, which is in only affirmative sentences. So I hope that helps. I should add one last thing here. If I have to pick between not any and no, so I have no friends, I don't have any friends, I would tend to use not any. I would usually form my sentences with not any. I just have a feeling inside of me like that is more common. I don't have any books, I have no books. I don't have any friends, I have no friends. I don't have any time, I have no time. They're both common, but I feel like I lean towards wanting to say I don't, and because that's negated, I have to use any. So there you go. All right, on to the next question. Fernando. So Fernando wants to know, what are the differences between Aussie English and British English? That's a pretty open question. So what have I got here? Australian English is different from British English and American English. Obviously, they tend to be, they're all mutually intelligible. You can understand all those languages, but there are differences. Australian English tends to be different with regards to the invention of words. So we use a lot of slang and we make up a lot of expressions and words. We really do that more than the British and the Americans, as far as I know. Deception as well. We create some of these words in order to hide the meaning that we're trying to say, and we use them with friends. So that's why there's so much slang. We use a lot of profanity. So Australians will swear more often than British people and American people. That's true. And we're often sort of more inclined towards humour. So we joke around a lot more. That's tied in there with swearing and with slang as well. And we also use language that kind of, those things, I guess, that we've talked about, emphasises the fact that we are a classless society. So we we don't really like talking about people above us. We won't really use Mr., Doctor, Mrs., Your Highness. We don't use any of that in Australia. Everyone is equal. We see everyone as equal, whereas in British English, I think, at least from what I've read and what I know of the British, they put a lot more emphasis on class. So people with doctorates probably want to be referred to as doctor because they want to have that sort of status. Your Majesty, Your Highness, you would use for the Queen. People are lords and dukes, and you have all of this class stuff happening that in Australia doesn't happen, and that gets kind of reflected in the language, okay? Something interesting that I was reading about too was the fact that because Australia has so many Aboriginal words for place names and objects in our language, the way that these words sound has had an effect on how we pronounce the English that we use. I wasn't 100% convinced by this, though it's an interesting argument and I'd have to know more. But one example sentence was, on a walkabout from Ulladulla to Wagga Wagga, I camped by a billabong, boiled a billy and cooked me a wallaby. So there's a lot of words in there you might know. Walkabout is kind of to go and explore, to go away from your place into the bush for a sort of undetermined amount of time. Ulladulla is a place in New South Wales, so is Wagga Wagga. That's a place in New South Wales. Both of those are Aboriginal words, Ulladulla, Wagga Wagga, as well as walkabout, although that's an English word that Aboriginals sort of took and made into their own thing. I camped by a billabong. Billabong, another Aboriginal word, and it's a sort of still body of water, smaller than a lake. That is a billabong. And then a billy. A billy is a tin that you boil water in. So I boiled a billy. It's kind of a small tin. You imagine a Milo tin that you put on a fire when you go camping and you boil water in it. And then a wallaby is again an Aboriginal name for a type of kangaroo, a wallaby. So anyway, those are some words in there that kind of give you an idea about how they sound and how the way they're pronounced may have influenced the pronunciation of the words that we use in English when we're saying them. But yeah, I'm not 100% convinced of that argument. Aside from those points, guys, pronunciation of vowels tends to be pretty different. Australia might have a few weird diphthongs, like saying "ite" and "ate" a bit differently from the British. We also don't really use the glottal T the same way the British do, you know, in words like little, bottle, whatever. They'll say whatever, bottle, little, water instead of water. We won't do that. They'll do that, or at least some of them will do that, not all of them. But they tend to be the biggest differences that I can sort of think about. So I hope that answers your question, Fernando. All right, on to Alexander's question. Alexander wants to know, do you use the word yes while speaking in formal situations like job interviews or in university or conferences, or can you just say yeah every time? So I guess saying yes would be more formal. Yes, that's right, exactly. Yes, yes, I am coming, yes. But I don't think that I would be disinclined to use yeah in interviews. It is informal, but I think that's tied in with the culture in Australia. If you go to an interview, at least personally, I would feel like I'm going to treat everyone as I would treat my friends. I'm not going to pretend like they're up here and I'm here. I would use either, but if in doubt, just use yes. But I would say that if you were an Australian, at least, going to an interview, they wouldn't even think about using yes or using yeah. They would just speak naturally and probably use yeah a lot more. Diana has a question here. What do you call a mate, or how do you use the word mate with a woman? Can you say mate to a woman in Australia? That's an interesting question. So in my experience, for men at least, men will use this on men all the time, though I would probably avoid using it on women myself, unless I was really, really trying to emphasize the fact that that woman was only a friend, okay? And it almost has a subtle feeling of suggesting they're a bit blokey as well. So I wouldn't be calling, say, a very effeminate girl, a very feminine girl, mate. You know, if she was wearing a dress in high heels, unless she was, say, a bit ochre, a bit of a bogan, I might do it then. If she's a real, you know, a real true blue Aussie girl, she might be okay with it, but it could offend some women. I wouldn't be too worried about it if I was you and I was learning English as a second language. I think people will love it, especially if they're Australian. I would almost say just do it, because people will smile. I think they'll understand. They're not going to take offense, even if you used it in the wrong context. They're going to understand you're trying to be Australian, you're trying to embrace this culture, you're trying to use the slang. So Diana, I would not worry at all about using mate on girls. Women, on the other hand, may call each other mate. So girls might call each other mate, they might call each other girlfriend. You might hear some women refer to each other as dal or love. In fact, some women in Australia, especially the ones with a stronger accent and who live out in the country, tend to refer to complete strangers as dal or love, and it's a term of endearment. So yeah, I would totally recommend doing it. I reckon you'd have a good time and people will smile. But the takeaway point is that yes, it is less common for a man to use it on a woman than a man to use it on another man, or probably for some women who are a bit more blokey, tomboys, probably those women too who are always surrounded by other men, especially blokey Australian guys. They're probably more likely to use it than just your average Australian woman. So I hope that answers your question, Diana. All right, Akan has a question here, and I have written a long response to this, so buckle in and sit back, guys, and enjoy this one. Okay, so Akan wants to know, what is the reason for contractions in Australia? So he's talking about the slang and the contractions. For example, words like arvo instead of afternoon, or smoko instead of smoke break, or brekkie instead of breakfast. Why do we do this? So this is sort of a bigger part of the Australian language itself, Australian English, and our culture. It's tied in with that, it's related to that. So there's a bias in Australian English towards invention, so creating words, being inventive with the language, and deception, creating words that you can share with someone else, with other Australians, with, you know, a small group, a big group of people, that kind of bonds you together. And this is somewhat associated with the convict influence in Australia, right? So the British got here in 1788, at least to colonise the place, and I think for the first 100 years or so of Australian history, up to 87%, almost 90%, almost 9 out of 10 people in Australia were convicts. And a convict is a prisoner, some kind of criminal. So Australia was founded effectively by convicts, by criminals that were taken from Ireland, different parts of Britain, and they were sent to Australia to never return. And they had to set up a colony here, doing hard labour usually, effectively slaves for a certain amount of time. I think they had to do it for 7 years and then they were freed. So for a long time, 90% of Australia was made up of prisoners, convicts, and their descendants. And so you can imagine that if you went to any part of the world and you took the prisoners from a jail and started a country with them, that would have a big effect on the future language, on the future culture, and everything associated with that country 10, 50, 100 years down the line. And that is somewhat why Australia has evolved the language that we have and the culture that we have. In fact, that's probably one of, if not the biggest reason why we are the way we are. So what have I got here? So there's a good quote that I have here. With such strong convict foundations, it was inevitable that Australia's linguistic traditions would be different from the mother country, Britain. According to Sydney Barker, the author of Australian Language in 1945, no other class of society would use slang more readily or adapt it more expertly to their new environment. No other class would have a better flair for concocting, for making new terms to fit in with their new conditions in life. So I think this is probably just something that brought us together, and it's been emphasised throughout history of Australia. So we have all kinds of things. We have rhyming slang, and that was originally from Cockney slang, which is a part, the Cockney language, the Cockney English is a certain part of Britain. And we started using that sort of slang here, so you'll have things like the dead horse. That rhymes with tomato sauce. We'll say dead horse instead of tomato sauce. And so the point there is that it kind of hides what we're talking about, but other Australians know when we say dead horse. So it bonds us together. So that's sort of why rhyming slang exists. We created a heap of different expressions that were unique to Australia, like to have a few kangaroos loose in the top paddock, meaning you're crazy. There's an episode on that we went over probably a few months ago on the Aussie English podcast. Go and check that one out. To have a few kangaroos loose in the top paddock, to be crazy. Mad as a cut snake, to be very angry, to be as mad as a cut snake. And then I'll give you this one. This is a crass one. Built like a brick shithouse. So a shithouse is an outdoor dunny, an outdoor toilet. And if you're built like a brick, you know, those bits of clay that build something, you're built like a brick shithouse, you're incredibly tough, you're really big. So again, it's kind of humour, a bit of swearing in there, and some slang. It's all tied into Australian culture. So it's kind of a bit of, you know, we're just like that. We're very laid back, we like to swear, we make jokes about stuff, we make fun of each other, and we make up a lot of slang. On top of this, we also started reversing the meanings of certain words, apparently. So words like bastard, which is a bad word usually, and ratbag, another bad word in England. We started using these as colloquial terms of endearment for people. So you will hear people say, "Oh, how are you, you old bastard?" And, "Oh, this guy's a bit of a ratbag." And it's a positive thing in that sense. So this is another way that Australians use slang to sort of differentiate themselves from British English. And again, there's that mateship, friendliness, and sort of humour involved in the language. But I guess the real point you were asking about is what we call the diminutive, and that is slang that is shortened. So afternoon, arvo, smoke break, smoko, breakfast, brekkie. Apparently, apparently there are about 5,000 of these different words that have been recognised in Australian English, and there are multiple reasons for this happening. So it seems like it's more informal, and it kind of reflects Australia's love of egalitarianism, so that we're all equal. No one's up here, no one's down here. We're all equal, we're all the same. And it sounds less pretentious. It sounds more friendly. It sounds friendlier than using full words. So instead of saying afternoon, which sounds very pretentious, like the British would have probably said to the convicts decided, well, we're going to create our own word and be different, less pretentious, more friendly, and that's how that sort of evolved. So yeah, it's an interesting way of thinking about it, avoiding pretentiousness. So as I've always said to you guys, make sure that you use slang words like arvo, brekkie, smoko. People will know what you mean if they're Australian, and they're going to instantly recognise that you're interested in the culture and be drawn to you and want to talk to you, and it's just a way of fitting in a little bit better. Before we finish up, I guess there's one little bit about profanity and informality at the end here. So there's an Aussie saying that I wanted to tell you guys. So this one is, if a guy next to you is swearing like a wharfie, and a wharfie is someone who works at the wharf down near, say, the port. A wharf is kind of like a pier. If the guy next to you is swearing like a wharfie, there's a good chance that he's either a billionaire or a wharfie. So the joke there is that if someone's swearing a lot in Australia, either they have a very low-paying job and they're a standard Australian, or they're the richest person in Australia, a billionaire. So that is sort of just a way of illustrating that we are all very much about not being classist. We're all equal. We're all very pro-egalitarian, and we like swearing, we like humour, we all like sort of getting along. And to put that in context, I looked up and there was an instance of one of our prime ministers swearing in an interview with a journalist using the F-bomb. He said the word fucking when he was talking about something that he really liked. You know, this fucking pub is so good, whatever the example was. that tends to be something that is very informal, that would not happen in Britain or in America. But in Australia, it tends to be sort of, it's all right. It's not really that big a deal. You're not swearing at someone. You're just sort of, you're swearing to show that you're enthusiastic. And I guess Paul Keating, the Prime Minister at the time, was doing it to show that he was just one of the rest of us. He's a normal person. He's not up here. He's a human, okay? So that, I hope, gives you a bit of an idea of the Australian language and Australian culture and how we differ from British English and American English. Why we love our sort of swearing, why we love our slang terms and expressions, and also to give you an idea of why we don't like class. We don't like having people above us or below us. That's why you'll find if you come to Australia that people will get uncomfortable if you call them Mr. or Mrs. or teacher or professor. At university, my teachers, even though they were 50 years old, would just say, call me by my first name. Do not call me Mr. Do not call me professor. Do not call me doctor. In Australia, that happens a lot because people want to be seen as equals. They don't want to be seen as above anyone else, okay? So, bit of Aussie culture there for you. 2 more, guys, and then I'll get into the comments section. So Gabrielle wants to know, can you please show us a bit about rhythm in Australian English? Talk about the techniques regarding rhythm. That was a really difficult one. So I need to actually research this a little more, and hopefully these books that you guys who are patrons bought me this week, hopefully these books are going to help me answer that question. So yeah, I don't really know enough to be able to do it justice, to be able to talk about that well right now. I would probably say that rhythm-wise, at least, the da-dum, the way that we speak with regards to rhythm, I would say that rhythm tends to be similar to British and American English. I don't notice anything that is very, very, very different from those guys and from us. I would say, though, that there may be slight differences with regards to connected speech, so linking words together, and the kinds of pronunciation that goes into how we speak and the connected speech that we use. So there are quite a few differences there that I will get onto in the future. But one thing that I guess is interesting about Australian English, as I'm sure you guys have seen around the place, is that, say, words ending in ER, AR, OR, URE, ER, or RE, sorry, all of those have the same sound of just like theatre, centre, water, polar, what's another one? Jaguar. We just say So that's an interesting thing that's sort of different about pronunciation. What else have we got here? So intonation-wise, though, there are some differences. Americans, there's some funny stuff that Americans do with intonation, like, so I was like, and then he was all like. They do this thing where the voice raises, and they do that in a different part of the sentence sometimes. Not all Americans, obviously, but some of them. Occasionally, you'll hear them on TV, and they tend to be rich girls who are a bit not educated, and they'll have that sort of aspect to their language. They'll be like, so like, I was doing like this, and then so like. They do this weird stuff with the language and the intonation like that that's very unique to that demographic in America. But Australia does something kind of similar with regards to making lists. So if we list something, for instance, if I told you guys what I did today. So I got up and then I went out and I went to the shops. Notice what I'm doing here with the intonation. It's going da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. That is very common in Australian English. So I've got an example here. Let's see if I can read all of it. So I went surfing, and then I came home, I had a shower, and I watched a movie. So you'll notice there that I go and then down, and then So I went and then. So that will happen quite a lot in Australian English. That was probably very confusing, but that is something that apparently is pretty characteristic of Australians. We will, when we're listing things that we've done, or I like this, I like this, I like this, you'll notice that it goes So that's an interesting thing that I'll have to cover in the future, but it's something to try and practice. If you really want to sound like an Australian, keep an ear out for it. Try and listen and just say, even ask an Australian friend, just say, I've heard that you guys, when you list things that the voice raises, can you show me how you would do that? Can you just tell me what you've done today as a series of events? You got up, you did this, and so it's an interesting thing that you might want to try and copy. But yeah, that's about all I can think of with regards to, say, rhythm and intonation at the moment. But hopefully I will learn more about that in the near future and can get back to you guys on the way in which I guess we use rhythm and intonation so that you guys can mimic that, you can copy it, you can imitate it and sound a lot more like a native speaker. That's the basic idea. All right, the last question here, guys, before I dig into the comments below and try and answer your questions. You guys have been so patient, so thank you for waiting and thank you for watching. Ruchi wants to know, hey Pete, I've got a question. My native language is Hindi and I'm wondering, do Indians who live in Australia have an Indian accent or an Australian accent? What do you reckon? Thanks. Firstly, Ruchi, good job saying, what do you reckon? As in, what do you think? What's your opinion? We use reckon all the time in Australia. It's very unique to Australian English and it means, what is your opinion? What do you reckon? I reckon, my opinion is that, and then you finish it with however you want to finish that sentence. I reckon it's going to rain today. It's my opinion that it's going to rain today. Anyway, all right, Indians in Australia. So when Indians from India, not Native Americans, when Indians come to Australia, if they haven't learnt English from a very, very young age, they tend to have a very strong accent. And I think this is primarily related to where they put the stress on words. And I'm not going to do an accent because it'll be atrocious. But Indians and Sri Lankans do tend to have very strong accents when they come to Australia. The good thing is, though, they tend to adapt incredibly quickly, and if they keep studying and if they keep working on that accent, it declines really quickly. For instance, I have a friend who I train with at the MMA gym, mixed martial arts gym in Melbourne, and he has been in Australia for, I think, 5 years and has close to no accent. So he has a slight accent, but if I didn't already know that he was from India and I just heard him speaking, I'd have no idea where he was from. So it is doable, guys, but he's worked really, really hard to reduce his accent. And I think too, part of the reason that I think Indians and Sri Lankans in Melbourne at least maintain their accent for so long is because we have really big Indian communities and really big Sri Lankan communities in Melbourne. So it's not hard to surround yourself with a lot of Indian guys and a lot of Indian girls, that culture, be using Hindi on a daily basis, as well as be speaking English with other people who have the same strong accent. So yeah, I guess that is the answer to that question. Anyway, I'm going to scroll up and check out to see if you guys have left me any questions in the comments here. So let's have a gander. Let's have a gander, which means let's have a look. Let's have a look. Rocio wants to know if the phrasal verb course is finished. Rocio, the phrasal verb course is almost finished. I'm just trying to work out when I'm going to have enough time to do the comparison episodes. So I want to sit down at some point and decide how I'm going to compare the different phrasal verb, the particles that go with the phrasal verbs, and do short episodes for that course in order to compare them, to contrast them. So if you guys haven't seen it and you want to learn phrasal verbs naturally, effortlessly like a native, I will post that link up there later, but just search for effortless phrasal verbs. That is the course that I offer, and I go through each particle. I ignore the verbs. I don't do the lessons based on the verbs. I do them based on the particle, like along, up, down, out, in. I focus on that and teaching you guys the patterns, the cognitive patterns, how English speakers are thinking about what does it mean to go something in, right? I'm teaching you how to do that, and then you learn to use these based on the patterns instead of based on remembering just lists of verbs. Anyway, so I've gone through 16 different particles so far. You know, about, in, out, down, on, all of those. And now at the end, to finish this course, I want to do ones like to compare up versus down so that you can see them in context next to one another, as well as in versus out or on versus out. So I'm just going to I'm going to work that out, and then I will start doing those episodes again, Rocio, but it's not finished just yet. All right. Mohammed, how's it going? Christine, how's it going? And Louise, what have you said here? I've studied English vowels and it looks pretty tricky and difficult when we try to practice daily conversation. So Louise, I would just say keep practicing again when it comes to pronunciation. At the moment, I'm learning French and I'm learning Portuguese, and you guys will probably laugh. Every morning I get up and I play, I have the audiobooks, all in Portuguese, all in French, and I have the books themselves, and I listen, I read, and then I read a whole page out loud in French, and then I do the exact same page again in Portuguese. But it's a daily thing. I just spend a little bit of time, 10 minutes, practicing my pronunciation and really paying attention to vowels. One of the things in Portuguese that kills me is avó e avó. There's two different sounds, o and o, that kill me. And I know they're kind of like the equivalent of bitch and beach in Australian English, where those are so close and they're really hard to tell. But I would just say keep practicing those vowels, do it all the time. Jump on YouTube and search Australian vowels pronunciation, and you'll find my video there with exercises that you can go through. It's about 10 minutes long. Just do that once a week and practice your pronunciation of those vowels, and you're going to notice a big change if you can continue to do that for a few months. No worries. Akan says thanks for the answer to his question. Po Jill wants to know, what about bloody? So the word bloody, that is originally British, and it is an emphasis. It is used to make something a little more extreme, and it is technically a swear word, but it is the kind of swear word you can say in front of anyone. It doesn't offend anyone. It's very, very, very benign. So you'll hear people say things like bloody oath, which is just a way of showing shock or surprise. You can also say bloody oath as agreement. Do you want to go out today? Oh, bloody oath, mate. Let's go. Someone gets hit by a car in front of you. You might say, whoa, bloody oath. You can also say bloody hell. And a cheat for you guys, a little secret, a little tip. If you want to say something and you want to use the word fucking, F-U-C-K-I-N-G, that's the very extreme, the very rude version of, I guess, how to emphasize something. So, for instance, if I hated this book, I could say, oh, this fucking book. But if you want to say the polite version, you can say bloody. Oh, this bloody book. Bloody book. So yeah, that is a cheat for you guys. If you want to swear and you're in company, you're around people you don't know, use bloody. And you just substitute it in for the word fucking, okay? But if you're around people who don't mind you swearing, who you can hear are swearing themselves, I would probably go towards fucking, okay? I hope you guys don't mind me swearing. It's the kind of language you're going to hear in Australia, so I probably need to do it more often. And you might hear me say it from time to time in podcast episodes where I'm interviewing other Australians, and I feel more comfortable using that kind of language. One quick thing to talk about the emphasis, you could say like, this book is horrible, and that's kind of like, okay, I get that you don't like it. You could say, this book is bloody horrible, and that sort of emphasizes it a bit. Okay, the book's horrible, the book's bloody horrible. You could say the book's really bloody horrible, brings it up a little bit more. But then if you want to swear, you could say this book is fucking horrible. It's really fucking horrible. So there's a gradient there, guys, okay? Be aware of that. There's a gradient there. Bloody's at the bottom, not really rude. You can use that anywhere. And fucking is right at the top, okay? So just, if in doubt, don't use it. Use bloody or just don't swear at all. I hope that helps, Pojil. What else have we got here? And sorry for shaking the screen, guys. It's on a book. So, Hoda. Hey Pete, I would like to ask, what is the difference between the past simple and the past perfect? Sometimes I feel there is no difference. Okay, all right, this is a tricky one. So the past simple, imagine my head is the present on the screen here, okay? My head's in the middle of the screen and this is the present time. Right now is a line between my forehead, my nose. One side of my face is in the future, the other side of my face is in the past. We use the past simple to talk about something that is in the past and it is totally finished. So for instance, if I want to talk about yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, that's all in the past. So I use the past simple. Yesterday, I went to the shops. Last year, I trained football. 10 years ago, I was younger. So we use the past simple for something that is in the past, started and finished, sort of a point, and it's all over. What was the other one you said? The past perfect though. So I think this is like had been, had done, had thought. That we only need to use when we're talking about two things that have both taken place in the past, a time in the past, and you're putting one of them in context with the other one. So if I want to talk about yesterday I went swimming, but before I went swimming, I had got up. I had had breakfast. I had showered. I had seen my parents. I had gone outside. Using the had tells me that out of those two things that you're talking about, the one with had happened before the other one that also happened in the past. So I hope that makes sense. If you had done something, if he had thought that, it always has to be put in the context of something else that also happened in the past, but before which something happened that you're saying had happened. So this happened yesterday, but before that happened, this had happened before it. I hope that helps. It's just practice. They're pretty rare tenses, and I think if in doubt and you're worried, I don't know how to use this, and you're speaking to someone, just use the past simple for both of them, but you might need to give it context. Yesterday I got up. Yesterday I went shopping. If you just say it like that, people don't know which one happened before the other one. I mean, it's inferred because you can't really go shopping before you get out of bed. But if there are two events and you just say, I did this and I did this, people might ask for context. Which one happened first? And you could just say, I did this before I did this. So that's a way of getting around having to use the past perfect. So I hope that helps. Sam Gassam wants to know, does this sound native? I was held off in the supermarket. No. So held off is a phrasal verb that means to hold someone or something away. So off in this case is talking about distance. If you hold someone off, you're holding them away from you. Okay, so if someone was attacking you and you had an army that pushed forward, they're holding the enemy off. Okay, you're holding the enemy off. In this case, what I think you want to say is I was held up in the supermarket. And held up means delayed. So imagine you're trying to go somewhere and someone puts their hands on your shoulders and lifts you up off the ground and you can't move, you can't get to the supermarket or you can't get out of the supermarket. You're being held up. And so that's a way of thinking about this literally, but figuratively we would use held up to mean delayed. Sorry, I didn't get home before 5 p.m. I was held up in the supermarket. I was held up at work. Yesterday I had got home late before we had dinner because I was held up at work. There you go. I'm trying to work in the last past perfect as well in there. So I hope that answers. Christine, hi Pete. I always have problems choosing the correct tense, especially simple past and the past. There we go. Well, okay, so, sorry. Jumped the gun. I jumped the gun. Okay, so Christine now wants to know the difference between the simple past and the present perfect tense. All right, so I'll try and explain this one as well. Imagine my head, again, is the present time, right? It's right now. The line between one of my eyes and the other eye is the present time. The left side of my body is past. The right side of my body is the future. We use the simple past for something that's happened in the past, and that period of time in which it happened is finished. So last year's finished. Last year I did this. I went there. I saw this person. I trained hard. I ate this. Last year's finished. This year I have trained hard. I have seen a lot of people. I have eaten a lot. I have practiced English a lot. As soon as you use have, as soon as you say have, I know instantly that the period of time that you're talking about includes the present. It started in the past, but it includes the present. It might go into the future. It might have just finished, but the thing is effectively not over yet. Okay, so that is the cheat. The way to think about this is that if you want to use the simple past without have, I did something, went somewhere, I thought this, I said that, the period of time is in the past and it's finished, completely finished. It doesn't include the present. If you want to use the present perfect, it's anything that has started in the past and goes until present or on into the future. So anytime this year, I want to talk about this year, what I've done, what I have done, I have to use the present perfect because this year isn't finished. So I would say, so far this year, I have taught English. I have practiced connected speech. I have drunken a lot of beer. I have. Last year, I did this. I went there. I read a lot. I taught a lot. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. But that is the thing to nail home. I've been doing this in a lot of my private lessons recently. The simple past, an event that happened in the past and it's finished. The present perfect, something that started in the past but includes the present. So I hope that helps. What else have we got here question-wise? All right. Can you pronounce mamãe in Portuguese? Yeah, mamãe. I hope I said that right. Mamãe. That's mother, and I think she's wanting me to say the nasal vowels in Portuguese. Mamãe. Flippin' is a synonym for bloody. It is. Flippin' hell, bloody hell, fucking hell. They're all synonyms. Hi Pete, should I say I wish I was there or I wish I were there? Either is okay to use. Technically, I wish I were there that's probably the one you need to use, because if you say I wish I and then you conjugate a verb, it has to be the subjunctive grammatically. Grammatically, it has to be the subjunctive. The average Australian isn't going to know what the subjunctive is, they're not going to know what that rule is, and they're not going to care about whether you say I was or I were. Okay, I wish I was there, I wish I were there. If I were you, if I was you. It doesn't really matter. Either's fine. What else? Great Aussie culture. I like egalitarianism, which is not in my country because of the British colonial past in India. Ruchi, yeah, I know. Nav wants to know, which one is correct? A lot of people or a lot of people? A lot of people are or a lot of people is? A lot of people are is the correct one there, Nav. So a lot of people are, because people is plural. A lot of people are. Although, yeah, that's a funny question. A lot of people... It depends. There can be tricky little situations like that, because what's happening there is you've got a lot of something. So you've got singular, a lot, and then you've got something, a group of things, a lot of things, which is plural. So in this case, at least, I would always say there are a lot of people that are, and then finish the sentence. But you might find that native speakers switch in is and are for other things. I don't think they would do it in this case, but they might do it with other cases, okay? So again, it's not that important, and it's something that you will get a feel for over time. You'll learn to do this over time, but keep at it. Sam, okay, what is this meaning? What would have the situation... I think you've done something strange with the verbs there, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. What would have the situation had to have been? Actually, yeah, maybe you're right. It's a very weird sentence though. What would have the situation had to have been escalated to? Yeah, actually you're right. What does it mean? It's just a complicated tense sentence. So it's talking about the conditional perfect, so what would have, so that's kind of put it in the present perfect. That's the idea of the things sort of happened, but you want to know what would have been possible, and then had to have been escalated to. So in that case, it's had is putting it into the past simple, and then you're using to have been, which is the imperative, like to need to. So it's like a way of saying what would have this situation needed or required to have been escalated to. It's a very difficult one to understand. So that is very advanced English. I wouldn't worry too much if you don't get that. So even I had to sit there and be like, huh? What else? Now Okay, I know how to use it, but I don't know when the time is to use it. Ayumi, I assume you're talking about one of the tenses I was talking about. So it's just any time you're talking about something that's completely finished, period of time, you use the simple past. If it includes the present, you will use, a period of time where something is happening. That's when you start using it. I would look up some exercises online that better explain how to do this. Write them out, practice saying them, and then a good way of practicing this thing is by talking about what you have done today, what you have done this week. So start the question with what have I done, and then everything that you say after that needs to be have done, had been, have seen. And the other one would be what did you do last year, 10 years ago, and that sets you up automatically to talk about something with the simple past. What? Okay, be over the moon. To be over the moon, I don't know if I want to answer that one, G, because that is this week's expression episode. So Akan suggested that expression, guys, in the Aussie English classroom. The Aussie English Facebook group. Akan suggested that, so that will be the expression that I go over this week. So stay tuned. Nav, none of them have, I think, so are you saying gun? So he's written here, none of them have gun. None of them has gun. Do you mean gone, as in to have disappeared, or do you mean a gun like poof, a pistol? Because if it was none of them have a gun, you could say that, or none of them has a gun. If that's what you mean, technically it should be none of them has a gun, because none is singular. None of them, not one, not a single person of them has a gun. But that was another example right there of where native English speakers will confuse which one of them is the plural. So they will say none of them have a gun because they're thinking them, those people have a gun. So again, that's something that you guys will probably get correct more often than native speakers. How where to use mostly and mainly. Ramy wants to know how and where to use the word mostly and the word mainly. So these are pretty much interchangeable. They're synonyms. I mostly do this, I mainly do that, and they just mean primarily. So because they've got the ly at the end instead of just most and main, you've got mostly and mainly. In those cases, it means that it is an adverb. So you have to put that in the context of a verb. Mostly, I run mostly, I run mostly every single week. So these tend to be pretty flexible as to where they can go in the sentence. I mostly do this, mostly I do this mostly. But yeah, they're associated with a verb. And they just mean that most of the time, or the main portion of the time, more often than not. The majority of the time I do this. So I hope that answers. So how should I say I'm in Japan, but I've been in Australia for a year? Does it include the present? You can't be in both, right? You can't be in Japan at the same time as you're in Australia. So that's why you would have to put that in the context of this year I have been to Japan once, but I am in Australia at the moment. Last year I went to Japan. Since the start of the year I've been in Australia for. So it's all dependent on the period of time that you're talking about. You have to put that into context. So the answer is yes. It could be present, could be the present perfect tense, could be the past tense. It just depends on when and in what situation you talk about being in Japan or being in Australia. Well, you're doing well with Portuguese. Thank you. I know the nasal vowels were very, very difficult. Omar, can you teach us the grammar and how we should use it correctly? Which grammar? Which grammar, mate? Omar, feel free to ask which grammar do you mean? It's about time I slept, or it's about time I sleep? That's a good question. I would probably say it's about time I went to bed, which is an interesting thing because it's like you're talking in the present but you're using the past simple. It's about time I went to bed. That's a good question. Nav, I would say it's about time and then I would follow that with the past simple. It's about time I left. It's about time I went to bed. It's about time I went for a surf. It's about time I ate dinner. I would say it with the past simple. The present would sound a bit strange. It's about time I sleep. It's about time I eat. It's about time I surf. That's a bit weird. In that case, I would use the past participle. So slept, went, did, etc. Alright, I might answer one more, guys, and then I'm going to go have some dinner. So, G. Would we use for future and past too? How do we use it in the past? Oh, man, that's a good question. So there are multiple ways. Would is a very complicated auxiliary verb. W-O-U-L-D. So, for instance, you can use would when you're talking about something habitual that you did in the past. When I was young, so during that period that I was young, where I did multiple things every single day, like going to school, when I was young, I would go to school. So we can use it in the past like that. Right now, I would like a drink. I'm really thirsty and I would like a drink. Yesterday, I would have been too tired to come out. So it's kind of like, that one's way more complicated and I can't think of the tenses at the moment. But yeah, so would has multiple different meanings. It can kind of mean the present, a little bit into the future, and it's a conditional. And then we can also use it in the past for multiple different things as well. The best thing that I would recommend with learning that is learn it in the context of stories. When do I use this? When do I use that? And then look up some exercises. I would literally just sit down, do one exercise out of some kind of grammar book on would. Do one every day, do it for a month, and you will crush. You will do really well at using would after you do something like that. So anytime you guys as advanced English learners come up against a problem, look online, look through my resources, buy a grammar book, use YouTube, whatever, find some sort of examples and then practice those examples that answer the grammar problem you have right in this moment, and just keep using your English learning experience, your day-to-day English, as a way of finding the things you find difficult and then learning them. So I find the present perfect difficult. I'm going to learn that for this week. I find the future tense difficult. I'm going to learn that this week. I want to talk about coffee. I'm going to learn vocab this week. So just keep doing that and filling in the blanks. Anyway, guys, don't forget to share this video if you liked it. Tag a friend who you think will benefit from watching this video. If they have any issues with English, if they're coming to Australia, if they are interested in learning the Australian accent, make sure you tag them in here or share this on their wall. It helps me, guys. Grab the free stuff in the description. There are freebies there to help you guys with your English. Download those. Sign up to the podcast. Get it on your phone. You can get it for free on your phone. Just search for a podcast app and then just search Aussie English in that app. It's free. It'll get straight to your phone. You can read the words that I say in most of the episodes, and then you can also download the freebies for each episode on the podcast. Also, if you feel like donating and supporting me so that I can buy more resources to help me teach you guys in the future, sign up to be a patron on my Patreon page. Just search Aussie English Patreon, Patreon. I'm going to start working out how to give you guys more on that Patreon page. So I'm going to try and come up with some ideas about what kind of things I can create to reward those guys who are donating so kindly. And I guess aside from that, guys, if you want to level up your English with weekly classes that are designed as courses with lessons, quizzes, all the bonus content for the podcast, go to the Aussie English Classroom. It's $1 for 30 days, guys. Get in there, give it a go. You can earn points, you can make friends, you can chat to me, and we do speaking challenges. It's really designed to upgrade your speaking. So there's lots of pronunciation, connected speech, imitation, and speaking exercises in the Aussie English Classroom. I cannot recommend it enough, guys, if you want to upgrade your Aussie English, especially your speaking. And then also, obviously, there is the Effortless Phrasal Verb course, which is a course designed to teach you guys to use phrasal verbs effortlessly like a native. Anyway, I feel like a really gross salesman, even though I know these resources are going to be great for you guys if you're having difficulties in Australian English. I've talked too much and I'm on the point of losing my voice. Have an amazing night, guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week at 7 o'clock my time on Tuesday. See you guys.